What's up, everyone? Riley here, and welcome back to the latest segment of Overkill Reviews, BangerTV's weekly heavy metal review show. If you haven't already, make sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and check out that dang Patreon. Spanning a career over the last 34-ish years with a bit of a break in there, if you ever sought after any introspective, woodland, avant-garde, black metal, there's a good chance you probably already know who this band is. Today, we are going to be taking a look at their 7th full-length record. This is In the Woods with Otra, and it is out April 11th, 2025 via Prophecy Productions. Formed out of Norway in 1991-1992, In the Woods was essentially a reboot into a different subgenre that the members had of a previous band called Green Carnation, which years down the road, In the Woods members ended up picking up Green Carnation again, so they are still an active band, although at this point, In the Woods and Green Carnation, they don't currently share any of the same members. So In the Woods put out their first full-length record in 1995, and it was called Heart of Ages, and it was one of the albums that people described as the second wave of Norwegian black metal. It was slow and it was mysterious and ambient, and there was so much variety in the vocals. Like, they had harsh male vocals and clean male vocals and clean female vocals, which sort of gave it a footing in a folk aspect as well. But it had that familiar tremolo-picked black metal that everybody loved. After putting out their third full-length record in the year 2000, which, might I add, had a really cool, unnatural, spacey cover of the Jefferson Airplane song White Rabbit on it, they decided to call it quits until they resurrected the band again in 2014 with 3 of the original lineup members. And since then, they have had 3 records to give to us, along with a bit more swappage within the band members. So when In the Woods put out their last record, Diversum, it was more of a melodic, progressive metal release, which isn't remotely comparable to the band's original music. But as members are coming and going and so much time has passed, how could you really compare? Like, give me a band that has spanned a career this long that still sounds exactly the same or still has the same members, because I genuinely can't think of one. And no, that's like really a challenge. Tell me in the comments if you can come up with one. Things that just make sense. So their last record, Diversum, that came out in 2022, was the first one to feature Brent Yellestad on vocals, although everything prior to him recording vocals had already been written for the album, so he didn't actually add into anything creatively. He didn't get to be a part of that songwriting process. So this is the first album that he has actually been able to creatively take a part in. I recently read in an interview that the band just did with Invisible Oranges that they felt Brent, as a writer, was a lot more open to maneuvering and changing ideas. And one of the things that they noted that they had focused on was matching vocal melodies to guitar melodies, which ended up being a major point of positivity that I noticed, as well as a huge difference in comparison from this album to the last album. When you have a moving or repetitive vocal pattern on a lengthy, progressive, really doom-esque song, when it's backed by a complementary and also repetitive guitar piece to carry it through, it makes everything sound so much more fluid and velvety and adds a roundness and cohesiveness to the big picture and the entirety of the album. So we're now in this progressive metal era of In the Woods, and that's fine, other than the fact that fine isn't my favorite subgenre of metal. And like I mentioned before, it makes sense that the band sounds different from all of this time that has passed and all of the different people that have added into this project creatively, for Christ's sake. But it's not the sound and subgenre change that I have a problem with. I'm telling you that there just isn't anything substantial here that I couldn't find somewhere else. The album is really melodic, and every song has a very level sound that flows together from track to track, which is a positive because then it's not really chunky and incohesive, but it also ends up being its downfall because it sort of just felt like a copy paste and then it all felt the same. And this all for sure comes from a definitive lack of building tension and then releasing it in a song. This has proven to me that there can be a thing as too much consistency. So even when we change into a harsh vocal break or we get more ferocity in the drums, there wasn't a build to get to that point. So that relief or satisfaction or climax that I get out of a huge crescendo just isn't there, so it just doesn't hit the same. It doesn't have that power that I would like it to have or need it to have or it should have, to be honest. When you've got songs that are 7 minutes in length, I want to see that build. I want to see that giant splooge. I want to see a cool break or a funky bit that takes us somewhere different from where we started. I want to grow with the song so I can feel it. Because if you give me everything right off the bat and all your levels are exactly the same, then damn, like that's really it. I want to be surprised. I want to be shocked. And I'm not asking anybody to reinvent the wheel here. There's just nothing that's going to keep me loyal. And I'm just going to go other places to find what I'm looking for because bands that sound like this also do that practice of tension and release. And I think that's crucial when you have lengthy songs. So, on a positive note, there are three tracks in particular that stuck out to me more than other ones on the album, and they just so happen to be our opener, there's one just about in the middle, and then our closer. So, we end up getting a sandwich effect. So, the record opens up with a song called The Things You Shouldn't Know, and it's super doom, kind of Candlemass, Sweet Evil Sun era. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, it's really repetitive in its lyrics, its melody, its structure, very doom. But those aspects of it also make it a really good earworm because that main melody is catchy and it gets stuck in your head. So memorable, good, bingo, love it.
All my travels have been far and beyond, and where one should never go, one should never go. Hear my tales to be joyous or appalled. Hear the things you shouldn't know, the things you shouldn't know.
Let Me Sing comes in just after the midpoint on the album, and I actually really enjoyed this one. It's got a broken dungeon synth like introduction, and that breaks away into a riff that makes this song one of the only even remotely black metal songs on the album, aside from like the odd riff here or there. Vocals then that just follow that feel very Woods of Ypres, Gray Skies, and Electric Lights inspired. They're really low. It does end up moving back into the familiarity of the rest of the album that feels very big, very production forward, very Stadium Lane style. But when we've got these harsh vocal breaks and that double bass kick on the drums, it just gives the whole song more guts and it's one of those things that I wish they just harnessed a bit more of throughout the rest of the album as well. And then the last track on the album to close off that sandwich and give it its extra piece of bread is called Wandering Deity. And it felt more on that experimentation progressive metal feel. And it really does it for me between the 140 and 230-minute mark. It has a really gritty, evil-esque black metal break in there.
And still all I ever feel is
And my only issue with this song was that it just sort of abruptly came to an end. Like the chorus is there and then it just fades out really quick. And then that's it. Like that's the whole album over. There's no outro, there's no bit to round it back to the start again. It fades and then that's the end. I hate to say this, but 85% of this album felt like it could have been the soundtrack for a musical theater play's antagonist when he's like concocting his great scheme on how he's going to ruin the protagonist's life or take over the kingdom. Like sort of Phantom of the Opera feeling, or dare I say it, like Scar from The Lion King.
long live the king.
Brent's voice is so theatrical and low and bold and rich, and there's these monstrous levels of dramatics, and that accompanied with the clean production makes it sound so performative, and that led me to not being able to take it seriously anymore because that's just not really my style. It makes it feel harder for me to be able to relate to them as authentic artists, and I feel more like I'm listening to somebody playing the part in someone else's story. The best way I can describe it is that it sounds choreographed and like the instrumentals are the movie score pieces to match the motivation of that antagonist. But hey, some people are really into that sort of extravagant display. It's just not my thing. So just because something isn't necessarily mind-blowing doesn't mean it's a throw in the garbage piece of trash. And just because a record's fine doesn't make it inherently sick. It's just a progressive metal rock record with some double kicks every now and then. And I don't think it's anything that I couldn't find somewhere else. It seems to be this pattern that like bands that did harsh stuff in the 90s, like Catatonia and Opeth and Enslaved, have now developed into this progressive metal phase. I don't know what that's about, but there was some songs on this album that I did like, and then there's other stuff that I thought, yeah, that was cool, and then I will probably move on and just forget that it ever happened. The production is really clean and clear, like I said, and it's just good to see people still channeling their creative passion after all this time. So with all that being said, I'm going to hit this one with a 3.95 out of 5 skulls today on Overkill Reviews. Shoutouts. So first up, I've got Alien Weaponry. Chris actually just did a review of this, so if you haven't seen that yet, go check it out, but I'm going to give this album another shout out just because it was that good. They are a 3-piece groove metal project hailing from New Zealand. The record came out on March 28th, and they have lyrics in both English and their indigenous language of Maori. There's lots of content on here that pushes environmental and cultural perseverance, which is great to see, and it also has a guest spot from Randy Blythe. from Lamb of God. So make sure to give that a listen. Second up, I have Fluisters, and they have a new EP out April 4th, 2025. If you've been here for a while, you're going to know that Fluisters is one of my favorite bands of all time. And they had put out two EPs in 2023, one at the start of the year, 2 tracks, one at the end of the year with 2 tracks. And I didn't know I was going to get a third part to this. So, same deal, 2 track EP. If you're into post black metal, supreme, phenomenal, heavy, magic, ethereal tunes, this is for you. It's just perfect. They're just perfect. And last but certainly not least, I have Inhuman Condition. And if you aren't already familiar with them, you got to check them out. This is the alternative project for Terry Butler from Obituary. We've got Taylor Nordberg from Deicide and Jeremy Kling, who's played drums in bands like Venom Inc. and Massacre. They're basically a Florida death metal supergroup. And when they put out Fear Sick in 2022, it was such an 80s death metal record. It was just rammed with meathead riffs and whammy dives, and I'm all here for that. I'm just excited to see them keep it going and see if they're going to shake it up or if we're going to get the same thing again. And that's all I've got for you today. I will see you next time. Cheers.